improvements to WMI and AD management. In this nugget, we're going to talk about two, related topics, some new stuff for both Windows Management Instrumentation and Active Directory Management. We'll start with some of the enhancements to the Get WMI Object commandlet and move on to WMI methods and WMI events, ways of executing code or making things happen with WMI and responding to things that happen in WMI. And that event thing in particular is really cool. Then we'll look at some improvements to the Active Directory Services interface in PowerShell version 2. And because I've really never been a big fan of ADSI as a way of automating Active Directory management, we're going to look at the new AD commandlets that are part of PowerShell 2 and Windows Server 2008 R2 and Windows 7. Talk about the different compatibility for that and really kind of show you how much easier it is to manage AD with those as opposed to ADSI. Now, the first of these big changes are actually kind of subtle. Let's look at the help for Get WMI Object. There's a couple of interesting new things that have been tacked on here. First of all, let me hit all this syntax. Here we go. Fits on one screen. There's several different versions of the command syntax now. And there always have been. You could query for a particular class or submit a dash query to submit a WMI query. That's all there. You've got a lot more things for some of the innards of WMI. 99% of the times, you don't need to mess with these things. But if you do need to mess with dash authentication, to specify no authentication, connect authentication, call, packet integrity, packet privacy unchanged. On the few instances where you might need to use those, it's useful to have that now as a parameter of the commandlet. Another new one is enable all privileges. WMI has got this kind of thing where even though your user account might have the permission to do something, for certain kind of sensitive operations like clearing the security event log, you also need to explicitly enable a privilege. It's kind of like having the little glass cover over the red button that launches the missiles. You might have permission to push the red button, but you still have to move that glass cover out of the way, and it's just there to prevent you from doing something bad accidentally. Well, enable all privileges will lift all the glass covers so that all the buttons you have permission to can finally be pushed. Again, there's only a few operations where you typically run into needing enable all privileges, but boy, when you need it, it's nice to have it. The other thing is impersonation. The default is to impersonate, and that's pretty much the only level that most WMI things will work with. Anonymous and identify will not work correctly. Delegate is usually too much. Let me just briefly explain the differences. Anonymous means that the computer you're connecting to, the remote computer that you're querying WMI from, won't know who you are. That won't work. Identify means that the remote computer will know who you are, but it cannot pretend to be you. And the way WMI works is it needs to use your credentials to execute queries. The account that WMI actually runs under is relatively low privilege. So what works is impersonate. That means the remote WMI service will know who you are, and it will be able to use your credentials to execute queries on your behalf. Delegate is actually one step too far in most cases. It means the remote WMI service will know who you are, it will be able to use your credentials to do things on your behalf, and it will be able to allow other services to impersonate you to do things on your behalf. Now, none of this is passing credentials across the network in clear text. It's all using Kerberos. It's all very safe, very, very secure, very, very encrypted, and so forth. Now, the last one, let me see, this one always gets buried because it's a short little one. Here we go, dash as job. This launches your WMI query as a background job, and that's something we talked about in nugget number 7. And I kind of showed you how to use WMI to do that there, so I'm not going to cover it a whole lot now, but just keep in mind that is one of the new improvements in PowerShell version 2, is that if you've got a long-running WMI query, let's say you're passing it an array of computer names, so it's going to have a lot of machines to connect to, then you can have that run in the background so that you can use the shell for other things in the meantime. So those are the big changes, and as always, running help-full will give you a lot more information on all of those things, such as the as job parameter. It will break down all the authentication levels and everything else, really explain it, and then when you get to the end, you've got tons of examples that you can play with to see how all those different things work. So definitely be sure to read the help. So those are the big changes to Get WMI Object. Now the next change is still WMI related, and it's this new commandlet called Invoke WMI Method. This is a fun little puppy. There's a couple of ways you can use it. Well, let me just show you the first way. Let's invoke WMI Method, and let's invoke it on the class Win32 process. And we're not going to invoke it on any specific instance. We're just going to grab the actual class, the raw class, because we want to run a static method called create. And the argument list we want to give it is the name of the process we want to create, notepad.exe. Now, direct your attention to the taskbar, and you can see I got a result back, return value is 0. That means good news. The process ID that was created was 2401, and there it is, notepad. So I can close that. So that's the first way to do it. The second way is a little bit more complicated. Let's do get WMI object. We're going to get the Win32 service class. Let's filter that to only get the ones where the name is bits, because that's a pretty harmless service that I don't think I can break. And then we're going to pipe those to invoke WMI method. So we want to invoke a WMI method on those actual instances, or instance in this case. And the instance we want to do is, or the method we want to invoke is, say, change start mode, and the argument list is going to be disabled. And then hitting it in would change that. And the benefit of kind of working with WMI methods this way is, keep in mind, you can always swing back over here and stick in a computer name. So now I can go get that service from a remote computer or multiple remote computers, get just the bits service off each of those computers, and change the start mode. So if you do a little bit of grunging around on your favorite search engine, let's just punch in Win32 service. Always look for the hit that comes from the Microsoft MSDN website, because that's the documentation. And here's my favorite method for Win32 service. It's the change method. And you can change the display name, the path name, the start name, the start password. That's the account and password that it uses to log on. So instead of change start mode, I could say change, and here's the fun part. Let's say I wanted to change the password. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the 8th parameter. So what I would need to do is give it a null for the first 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I can give it my new password. So this is a trick you can use to go out and retrieve a service from multiple computers and change the password that it uses to log on. Of course, that'll take effect the next time the thing actually restarts. So, the next time you reboot the server, or you could do this again and just stop and restart the service, whatever you want to do. So really some cool stuff that you can do that way with invoking methods on WMI objects, and it's an easier way than we had before, because as you can see, you can take multiple instances, like an instance of Win32 service from multiple computers, and invoke a method on them all at once. And if you look at the help for invoke WMI method, you get a lot of things like being able to run it as a background job, throttle limit, confirm and what if, enable all privileges, a lot of the same connection parameters that you have with get WMI object, like authentication and authority and so forth. And again, pays to read the help. There's a lot of kind of neat hidden functionality tucked away in here. This is where you're able to pipe it a management object, give it an argument list, give it a name of a method, and then invoke those all as a job if you think it's going to take a while, like if you've got 12 computers or something. So definitely another cool little addition to WMI. Now the next bit is also WMI related. This one's a bit trickier. I've got this in a script. Let me kind of play with the sizing here. I want to do this in the blue shell so you can kind of see that I'm not hiding anything up my sleeve. Let's make this window just a little smaller too. Okay. So here's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to define what's called an event query. See, WMI is capable of responding to all these different types of events, things that happen on the operating system. So I'm going to define this event query first. And let me just copy and paste it out of here. So here's what this is. And here's how an event query works. It always starts with the keyword select, and then a list of properties that you want to retrieve. And now these are properties of the event object. I always just get all of them, and that's what the star does. and then the keyword from, and then the name of the WMI event class that you want to query. In this case, it's instance modification event. And it's a double underscore almost always in front of the method names. And what you'll get here is this particular event is triggered anytime a WMI instance of any kind is modified. Now, we'll talk about kind of how to narrow that down in just a sec. Next is the keyword within, and then a number, and this is the polling interval. This means I want you to check every 2 seconds to see if there are new instance modification events that have happened. Now I want to narrow it down with a where clause. And I want to have 2 different criteria. I want the target instance to be a Win32 service event. So I only want to look at events where a service was modified. So that's target instance is a, one word, is a, that's an operator. And where the target instance's state property is now stopped. So basically, I want you to notify me when someone stops a service. Easy enough. And what action do you want to take? Well, I've got it right down here. Let's just copy and paste that one too. Copy. Paste. And now I'm going to register the event. So we'll copy this and paste it. So I've registered, and I've said I want to register a WMI event. I want you to let me know when this happens, my event query, and when it does, I want you to take this action. So now let's just stop service bits. That was probably stopped already, so let's start service bits. And now let's stop it. Service stopped was displayed. So it reacted to that event and displayed that at the console. Now let's just look for get command, and we'll look at nouns that are noun WMI event. So you've got registered WMI event. So how do you make this stop happening? All right, so clear the screen. Now, how would you manage this? Well, the first thing you can do, and we'll talk about this more in nugget number 16, because really, even though this is a WMI event, it's being handled by the PowerShell event handling subsystem thingy. So I can say get event subscriber, and there I have a subscription ID of 1. So now I can unregister event 1. And that'll undo that event so it's no longer running. So there's lots of different WMI events you can look at. Some Google searching will turn up some nice examples. And oh, you know where else you might find some nice examples? Help register WMI event -full. There are 4 examples of different events, including a Win32 process trace. There's another one here for instance creation event. This one's fun. This is targeting for the creation of a process, but what you can also use this for is to look for the creation of like a Win32 underscore logical disk. So if someone sticks a USB drive in their computer, then Windows has to create a new instance of logical disk to represent that. You can capture that as an event with WMI and automatically eject it, or display a message, or write something to a log file on a server someplace. So there's lots of cool stuff. You just kind of have to get a little creative with it. So that pretty much wraps up the new WMI stuff. Let's move on to some Active Directory stuff. So let's start with a quick refresher on ADSI, just in case you haven't been using it lately. ADSI always lets you start with an ADSI query. Now it's going to use probably one of 2 providers, the WinNT provider or the LDAP provider. Note that those are case sensitive. You've got to case them exactly how I have them typed here, and these are slashes, not backslashes. Now you might ask yourself why you would care about the WinNT provider, because you probably have an Active Directory domain, not a Windows NT domain, and that's fine. The WinNT provider is perfectly capable of talking to Active Directory. Just give it the domain name, the name of the object you're after, and then optionally the class of object you're after. User, computer, group, something like that. And the benefit is you don't need to know the exact location of the object within the domain. To execute that query, give it in square brackets the ADSI type adapter, and then your query. That will execute the query, and whatever object comes back from it, in this case, will be stuck into the user1 variable. Now let's just get a little split screen action going on here, and I'll show you what that does. So if I take user1 equal to ADSI query1, and then I take a look at user1, you can see that I got back a user, and there's the information for it. So let's just pipe him to get member. You can see some of the properties that are available on that object. Auto unlock interval, description, full name, and so forth. Now, down here on my script on line 7, you can see the syntax for retrieving information. You actually got a couple ways. You could just access the property directly, description, and there it is, built-in account for administering the computer/domain. Or to be a little bit more generic, and this allows you to get to a wider variety of properties, you can use this get method to retrieve that. The put method on line 8 of my script also will allow you to modify, so you can modify just about any property. Here I'm modifying the description property and changing it to built-in account for running the domain. Now, the LDAP provider works similarly. It obviously is aware of everything in Active Directory, so you can get to things that the WinNT provider can't. You can get to organizational units. You can get to contacts, things like published printers, different naming contexts, and so forth. But it is a little bit more complicated to use. The query has to provide a complete path to the object you're after. In this case, the canonical name for the user is administrator. And then it is not in an OU, it is in the built-in user's container. So you give the canonical name of the user's container. If it were an OU like sales, it would be OU equals sales. And then you give the DC company DC.pri, so that means it's in the company.pri domain. I've put that into query 2, and you execute it the same way. User2 equals ADSI query 2. And now let's take user2 and pipe it to get member. And you can see that we really get a kind of a different set of properties here, because this is an Active Directory object. There's a little bit more stored there. You've got a lot more information, not just description. You might have things like office and city and things like that. In fact, you don't see those here because by default it only pulls over a limited set of properties. So let's see what happens if I say user2 get city, since that's one I said. Okay, didn't come back, and it said the directory property cannot be found in the cache. So that's something to kind of be aware of. There's some additional methods you have to execute if you want to retrieve all the information back or retrieve specific properties. I'm not actually going to cover that because ADSI is not my favorite way of working with the directory, and a bit later in this nugget I'm going to show you my favorite way of working with the directory, which is a little easier. But just kind of wanted to give you an overview of ADSI so that we could talk about some of the stuff that's new in ADSI in version 2 of Windows PowerShell. So the cool new thing in ADSI in PowerShell version 2 is this directory services.directory searcher. It's support for this .NET object in Active Directory. And this is the way I like to use it. I've created a little function for myself called find user, and I'm accepting a single parameter, $SAM, for SAM account name. And look at this technique. Rather than assigning a default account name, I am assigning a default that throws an error. So if you try to run this function and you don't provide a value, PowerShell will attempt to assign this as the default value, and that results in an error being thrown saying you must enter SAM account name. So it's kind of a neat way to make sure I have a value inside my $SAM variable. So I really get started here by creating the new directory searcher object and putting it in the searcher variable. I'm creating an LDAP filter in the searcher's filter property. This is going to search for objects of the category person, the class user, and with the SAM account name property equal to whatever was in $SAM. And because I use double quotation marks, my variable will be replaced by its contents. I ask my searcher to find 1. Now it's completely possible that I have given it criteria that might result in multiple hits. And so there's another method, and I'll show you that in a second, called find all. In this case, it's really impossible for 2 accounts to have the same SAM account name. And once the searcher has found the 1, I don't want it to waste time looking for more. So that's why I'm using the find 1. Now it's possible that I'll get nothing back, so I'm checking to see if my results have a path length greater than 1, and if they do, my function will return whatever came back from the searcher. Otherwise, it will return the string not found. And to use this, I just run find user djones. And it's that simple. So this is a kind of a useful way to search the directory to find a particular user account using ADSI. But that's not all. Here's another way I can do this. A little bit less formal, but I just want to show you some examples. Again, creating the searcher. Here I'm creating a new directory entry, and I'm retrieving the sales OU from the employees OU of the company.pri domain, and I'm storing that OU in the root variable. I'm taking the searcher's search root property and assigning it to that directory entry. So the search will begin here and then move down through the directory hierarchy, returning a max of 100 results, only returning objects of the category person and the class user, and I want it to find all. So it's going to find me 100 users from this location on down. So this is a way if you need to search for something in the directory and you need to find more than one. Now I've kind of moved through this quickly. I do want you to see this. It's a new feature in version 2. You may run across it. When you do, I want you to know what you're looking at. But this is not my favorite way of managing Active Directory using Windows PowerShell version 2. To see my favorite way, let's exit here and go into the main shell. And I'm running on Windows Server 2008 R2. 2008 R2 and Windows 7 are both compatible with a new set of commandlets. And let's see, I'll show you where they live. They're in the PowerShell home directory under the modules folder, under the Active Directory folder. So all I need to do is say import module Active Directory. It's going to take it a second to import. It's got to load this up. It's going to map a drive. You'll see it's mapping it to my domain. And this is really, really cool how this works. So let me kind of walk you through this. Now, before we do that, I guess, compatibility. The commandlets only run on Windows 7 and Windows Server 2008 R2 and later versions of Windows. You can use them to manage any Windows Server 2008 domain, and if you download the web services for Active Directory, you can also use them to manage Windows Server 2003 domains. So let me see if I can find that really quick. Let me pop open Internet Explorer here. And oh yeah, I hate this. First time Express, get me out of here. Okay, download.microsoft.com. And I think the best keyword is probably Active Directory Gateway, because I think these are called gateway services or something like that. Let's see here, Active Directory Management Gateway Services. You download this, stick it on one of your domain controllers, either for Windows Server 2003 or 2008, and you can use the commandlets I'm about to show you to manage a 2003 or 2008 domain. These gateway services come with 2008 R2. So anyway, the practical upshot of this is you can use these commandlets to manage older domains, but the commandlets themselves will only run on Windows 7 and Windows Server 2008 R2. So that said, I've got them imported. Let's do a get command. We'll look for all the commands that have AD in the noun, and you can get a preview of what's available here. Unlock AD account, restore AD object, new AD user, get AD user, disable AD account, all kinds of stuff. In fact, let's do that again and pipe it to measure object. You're going to have 76 new commands available for managing the domain, and I much prefer these over something like the ADSI stuff I was just showing you. For example, get AD user, filter, give me everybody with administrator. Error parsing query. Oh, well, that's because you can't do wildcards. Now, how could we possibly learn how to use this commandlet? Well, Dawn, you could just tell us, but I'm not going to because I don't have time to show you 76 commandlets. Instead, I really want to encourage you to read the help and ask for the full help, and I'll show you why in just a second. Not only does it give you this nice breakdown, you can see how this works. You've got credential, so if you need to connect with alternate credentials, there's a way to do that. But you get a breakdown for every single one of these parameters, including, I think we just scrolled by, dash filter, with lots of examples. So you get lots and lots of examples. And if you keep scrolling past all these parameters, you will eventually get to some detailed examples. Now, the filter parameter is required. If you don't provide it, it'll prompt. That's because it doesn't want to bring your domain to its knees by trying to retrieve every object. But if you want to, you can just get every object out. So getting a user or a computer or anything else is much, much easier with these commandlets than it was with ADSI. These commandlets are my preferred way of managing an Active Directory domain in Windows PowerShell version 2. And you've got other stuff in here too. You've got get AD computer dash filter star. So there's a computer there. You've got new AD computer, new AD user, all kinds of other stuff. So if you kind of get used to using these things, And you'll find plenty of examples in the help that show you how to do it. You probably won't have to mess with that ADSI stuff again. You can just focus on these commandlets. Now, if you're using PowerShell version 2 and you've got an older domain, maybe a Windows 2000 domain or even a Server 2003 domain, but you don't have any 2008 R2, you're not going to have any Windows 7, so you're not going to have the option to use these commandlets, then here's what I want you to go to. http www.quest.com/PowerShell. This is a free set of Active Directory commandlets, and here they are, PowerShell commands for Active Directory. They work very similarly to the Microsoft ones, and they will work against a 2000 domain. You can use those commandlets from within PowerShell version 2, and they'll run on Windows XP, Windows Server 2003, Windows Vista, Windows Server 2008. So if these built-in Microsoft commandlets aren't an option for you, then look at those Quest commandlets. They have commandlet names like get Q AD user and get Q AD computer and so forth. The Q stands for Quest, so that way if you have both sets loaded at the same time, the names won't overlap and conflict. But look into that. And the idea is start managing your directory using those commandlets instead of ADSI. ADSI is just much more complicated than it needs to be. In this nugget, we started by talking about some of the improvements to get WMI object, and we looked at how to execute WMI methods en masse. Now, you've always been able to execute WMI methods in PowerShell, but with the Invoke WMI Method commandlet, you can do it in bulk with lots of instances, even if they're from different computers. We also looked at WMI events, which is brand new and allows you to respond to instance changes or instance creation, and really write custom actions that just pop up and happen when whatever event you're looking for occurs. We looked at the ADSI improvements, such as the ADSI searcher, and we looked at those AD commandlets. Keep in mind, they only run on 2008 R2 and Win 7, but you can use them to manage 2008 and 2003 domains if you get that gateway service that I mentioned. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.